All right, what's up everyone? This is Don with Third Creative, and this is the walkthrough tutorial video for the Outfield baseball and softball Photoshop template. In this video, I'm going to walk you through all the layers, the processes, and hopefully cover anything and everything that you might need to know in order to create the best images possible using this design. As always, you will get 10 files covering a variety of ratios. There's 3 verticals, as you can see here, 2x3, 4x5, and 1x2. We also have 4 horizontals, which includes a 5x4, 2x1, 3x2, and also a panoramic 3x1. If you got your 5x4 memory mate file, and then a couple 1x1s. One of them, which you'll see right here, is for game day images, and the other one is for your button files. A few things to talk about with this one before we jump into it, and let's zoom in a little bit so we can see a little better. One is that I do have specific infield options depending on the sport that you're creating for. So you'll see on the left we've got a baseball infield, and on the right we have a softball infield. So I'll show you how you can switch between the two, but I thought that would be pretty important. Another detail that I noticed is that by default these bleachers are red. However, not every team you're creating for will be red, and so I gave you the option to adjust the accent color of the bleachers. So you can see on the left I kind of made it this teal blue color just to match, but I will demonstrate that as well. Also, this template comes with 3 fonts that are used both in the layers and in the sample images. They're all commercial free. However, I wanted to demonstrate that you can easily switch the fonts to any font of your choice. So if the fonts that I'm using in this template don't quite work for the team you're creating for, feel free to experiment with that and try some other fonts. And this is a image that I created with this template, but I just went through the fonts that I had and found a few that I thought would look good just to demonstrate that. So always keep that in mind. You're not stuck with the fonts. And then we have a few sample images where you can see just some examples. But one thing I'll point out is that depending on the lighting and the uniform color, I decided to change the hue of the sky. So this is clearly different between the left and the right. You can adjust the saturation and the contrast, and you can kind of make it match your color scheme where you think it looks good. So you've got the option to do that. You could even go completely grayscale like I did here. But these are just a few examples. But let's go ahead and jump into this. We'll jump over to Photoshop. Let's get this where we can fill up our screen. Not sure what happened there. There we go. So I'm going to be working with the 4x5 vertical file. Just keep in mind that the basic structure of the layers and the functionality is pretty consistent across the board. So same concept should apply to all of the other files. I always like to start at the bottom. I've got everything divided up into these layer folders, trying to keep it organized. You can kind of see where everything is by turning them on and off. But we will open up the very bottom folder, which is background layers, and we will go to the very bottom and start there. Change lower background color. So a lot of you, or most of you probably, are already very familiar with this, but this red is the red you're seeing at the bottom. In order to change that, you would just double click on this little swatch icon here, and it'll bring up your color picker. From here you have a few options. One is you can come over to the uniform and just kind of sample somewhere to get a starting point. You can kind of move around, and then you can come over here and fine tune it to your liking from there. The other option is to click anywhere in this prism to get the general hue that you're looking for, and then at that point you would just start clicking around inside this window to get the level of saturation and lightness and darkness, get it just right how you like it. You can always come back to it if you customize everything else and think it needs to be adjusted, but it's pretty simple. Next we have our pinstripes layer. And if I turn that off, you can see a little less detailed, but that is an option. To change the color, you'll see the word color overlay. It's a smart object, so we've got a smart filter on it. So I will double click the word color overlay. Technically not a smart filter, but you get the idea. It's a layer style. So you can see what I've done here. I didn't go with pure white. I thought that was a little too distracting. So if I go with pure white, it doesn't look too bad, but I felt like leaning a little into the red just kind of made it a little more subtle, but I just felt like that worked. So think about that when you're doing it. If it's a little too distracting, you can kind of lean into the background color a little bit. So if you were green and white, you could lean into the green, which obviously now it looks like Christmas, which that didn't look good, but you get the idea. Now we have a fabric texture. If I turn that off, it'll lighten up a little bit. Probably have to zoom in a little bit to be able to see this texture. It's kind of subtle, but it's there. I thought it was a nice extra detail or touch. It does have a level, so if you want the contrast to be greater or lesser, you can open up this levels and play with these sliders and see if you can get it how you like it, but it should be pretty good as it is. The next layer is a subfolder, which basically contains this shape layer, and the shape layer is what everything is clipped to for this upper area. So if we turn it off, you can see all of that goes away. Turn it back on. Really not a lot to do here other than where it says stroke on this subfolder, that is this outline right here, this white. So to change that, you would double click the word stroke to get your layer style window up, and this color swatch right here. You could change it to any color you want, just the same way that we just demonstrated with your color picker. You could also, let me bring it back up, you could increase this number here or decrease it to make this line bigger or smaller, fatter or thinner. That's an option as well. Now we have our background image, which is clipped to this shape layer. There is a field blur smart filter that's applied to it, which creates the appearance of depth and a little bit more realism. If you want everything to be more in focus and sharp, you can turn it off. That's up to you. You can leave it on. But as I mentioned in the very beginning, you may want to play with or adjust the color of the bleachers, the accent color. So to do that, you will actually need to double click on this icon right here. It's a smart object. It will open up a separate window where you can see the image as a whole. Now over here in your layer panel, at the very top, this one that's blue, this is the one that you will turn on if you do not want the default red. So you would just click in this little blue area to turn it on. Now by default, it is set to this blue color. Now, all of this doesn't show in this particular file, but it does in some of the others. So I created a layer mask that will apply to everything. The left, which is in a shadow area, so it's a little harder to see, but also the right as well. We'll zoom into this area so we can see it just a little bit better. So if this blue isn't the color you're looking for either, we just need to double click this icon right here to bring up our HSL properties. So you have a few options. If you really want to simplify it, you could click this colorize box, and it's going to change these values. You can play with these sliders here, but if you want it more saturated, you can move this up. And now you can just use this slider, and the color that it lands on is actually the color that you're going to see. And then at that point, it's just a matter of increasing or decreasing your saturation, your lightness, your darkness. You don't want to get too carried away, or it might not look too real if you darken it or lighten it too much or make it too overly saturated. But when you first open it up, colorize is not checked, and so you can see it's landing here in the green area, but you're seeing blue. So you can also just move the slider and look at the real time color on your screen. and land there and do the same as far as saturation is concerned, if you want to do it that way. A couple ways. Let's get back. While we're in here, let me talk about these other two adjustments. I added this one to desaturate this brick. If I turn it off, it's really bright red, and it was a little too bright, so I decided to leave this here so you can turn it off if you want it brighter, or you can leave it. Really not something most of you will need to, to adjust or do anything with. But I also have another option for a little brighter, more saturated grass. So if I turn that on, you can see it gives a little boost to the grass. So you can see if you like that, or if you like it the way that it is. You can turn it on or off. Once you get it how you like it, you can go ahead and click this X up here. You're going to see this window. It's very important that you hit save. If you hit don't save, then it will not retain all the changes that you've made. So we'll go ahead and hit save, and it will bring us back eventually, once it's done processing, to our template window. So you can see it retain that. And I'm going to hit undo so we get back to our red. But that's how you would adjust the color of the bleachers and also the grass if you wanted to use that. Now, just above it, you can see we have a baseball infield option. So if you're shooting or creating for baseball, you would just click right here to turn that on, and now we have a grass baseball infield. If you're shooting softball, you would leave it off. That is up to you depending on what you are creating for, which sport. Next, we have a saturation boost, but this is also where you can adjust the sky color. I'm going to kind of demonstrate that just a little bit. So you can see that I call it a saturation boost because I've got the saturation boosted quite a bit. If we come back down here, it's much less saturated, so you may want a little less saturated, more washed out look. You may want a more saturated look, so you can play with that. But when it comes to the sky, most of the sky lands here in the cyans. So if you click on the cyans right here, you can see I've got a boost in the cyans, and I've decreased the lightness, darkness a little bit. But if you want to change the sky color, you could click on the cyans, and then this top slider, you can move it left a little bit, and you can move it right a little bit. You move it too far to the right, it'll get purple. You move it too far to the left, it'll start to get green, and you just don't want to get too carried away. But depending on which way you want to go, if you want more of an actual blue, you can come over here to the right. And then again, it's just a matter of adjusting your saturation. Maybe you want less saturated, probably not too much more saturated, but you can play with these three sliders to get different blues for your sky, so that it works best with the subjects and the uniforms that you're using in the template. So that's how you would do that. We'll go ahead and try to get it back the way that it was. Next we have additional sky contrast. So this is a levels adjustment. If I turn it off, you can see it's much more washed out. I felt like it needed that contrast boost, which also increases the saturation when you use levels. So we get an added boost of saturation up there. Next we have some background haze / atmosphere. These are some layers that I put in here, and if I turn them off, you can see, the haze goes away, and the haze is there because that's more realistic to me. So you can always adjust the opacity values if you feel like it's too much or too little. You can also turn them off if you want to. Next we have our large background letter. So this large H, which is transparent, somewhat transparent, that's what this is. And so to change that, you would double click the T icon. It's going to highlight everything, and I'm going to hold down shift to keep it uppercase and change to a B. Now you may want it bigger or smaller, and you probably already know how to scale, but if I come up here and click on the move tool, click on a corner anchor point, and I'm going to hold down Option or Alt and Shift, and you can scale up or down. You can click inside to move it around. You can get it how you want it. But that's how you would change the letter itself. Now, there is a gradient applied, so if I turn that off, you can see, it'll take a second here, it's more transparent. This just adds like just a little bit of a shine effect, I think I would call it. That's optional, so if you don't want that, you can turn that off. But the stroke outline is white. If you want to change that color, you would just click on the word stroke like we did before, and you can change it. I think in one of my sample images for softball, I went with kind of a softball yellow. It's a little too green. It was something like that. So you can play around with that and change it if you need to. Next, we have our exposure vignette. All this does is darken these corners a little bit, helps draw you into your subject. So if you don't like it, you can turn it off. It brightens it up quite a bit. If you feel like it's too much or you want a little more of the effect, you can double click on this icon to get your properties window up here, and it's this slider right here. You can go to the left to make it darker, go to the right to lessen the effect. You can fine tune it like that. And that is it for the background layers. Let's close it up and move on up to this next folder, which is our upper text. I'll turn it off. You can see there's not a whole lot in there, but we'll open it up and go through it. So the very bottom here, we've got our upper subtext. So let's zoom in, take a look at that. Now you'll notice I've got a dark blue on the left side here, and I've got a white cloud over here. So it makes it a little bit tricky to stand out. So I put this drop shadow on here to help make it stand out. So if I turn it off, you can see it's just a little harder to make it out. But basically this is the same. To change what it says, I have these dashes on the side. So if you don't want the dashes, you can just double click here, start typing. If you want to retain those dashes, you can come up and click and drag over the part that you do want to change. And you would just, so I could put and we'll say holiday baseball, and you can do that. Now if you want to really get into it, you can always come to your character panel. This right here is your kerning, which I have set at 500. It basically controls how far apart all of your letters are. So if you want them to be more space in between each character, you can increase the value, or if you want less space, you can decrease the value. You could also increase or decrease the actual size of the text. I'm getting really deep into it, but you probably won't need to do all of that. But those are all options to get it just right. So next we have our upper primary text. So this is a script font, and I've got some layer styles on here, but I also have it kind of tilted to the left with a curvature. So I'm going to double click here to activate all of the text. Now up here at the top, you'll see this icon. If I click on that, this is basically our warp window, which I have an arc with a value set to 10. So if you want it completely straight, you could set the value to 0, or you could use this drop down window and just select none, and then you can have it straight. So you're not stuck with the curve if you don't like that, or if you don't want that. Basically it's the same. You would double click and just type over like so, and you can scale and position it how you want. So if it's a little too wide, I'm going to click on this anchor point and hold down Shift and Option, Shift and Alt, and you can do larger, smaller. You can move it around, get it just how you want it. But controlling the color is the same. So on your text, you'll see in your character panel, you'll see up here, your contextual toolbar, you've got this option, but you can change the actual primary color. Once you get that, you may want to adjust the stroke colors, and there's 2 strokes that you'll see on this one. Let's go back to holiday. So you'll see we've got a gray and a red. So it's the same thing. We'll double click on the word stroke itself. This one is the inner, so you can see is gray. You just click on the color swatch icon and we're back in our color picker. And so you can change it to anything that you want. Drop down and select the one just below it and we'll have our outer, and it works the same way. You can play with the size values, so if you want one of them to be bigger or smaller, you can play around with that if you want to. That's totally up to you. There is an inner shadow that I have set up which creates this three-dimensional look, so you can play with the opacity if you want to lighten that up or darken it. You know, that's up to you, or you can click this check mark and you could turn it off completely. Another option right now is the angle. You could go completely opposite to get a different look. So just some ideas, just some options depending on what you like. I do have another option built in, so if you turn this off, you can turn this one on. It's a little more standard. I don't like it as quite as good, but it's the same effects, but just with the other font, and it has the curve on it, so you can pick which one you want to use. We'll close that up. Here we have a paper texture that is clipped to it, so you can see the texture right there. It's pretty subtle. Next we have our subject image folder. It's red here. If we open it up, you can see we've got our sample subject in here. So this is where you will drag and drop your images to, unless you're using automation, and then you've already got that figured out. Pretty simple, but you would basically drop them in here, scale them to your liking, position them to your liking. Pretty simple, pretty straightforward. The biggest thing about this layer folder that people ask about is the gradient mask. And if you've watched previous templates, you've already template tutorials, you've already seen this demonstration, but it's red on red, so it's hard to see, but basically she fades from full opacity to zero opacity, and this look is a result of this gradient layer mask. So if you want to adjust it, there's two ways. There's one kind of a cheat code way that I like to call it, which is just clicking on this chain link here to unlock the layer mask. And you have a few options. One is to click on this anchor point and hold down shift and click inside and just drag it down, drag it up, so you can change the positioning of it if you want to. If you want it a little less let's see here, change how gradual it is, you could not hold down shift and you can see how it makes it, I don't know the right word, just not as gradual. So the more you stretch it out, the more space the transition will take up, if that makes sense. The other option is to just recreate it by selecting the mask and then selecting your gradient tool, which you'll see right here. Just make sure you have white to black or black to white, and then all you have to do is click and drag. Now if you want to hold it straight, just hold down shift, drag down, you can come up to this top anchor point, the same thing, but that's all there is to creating a gradient layer mask. So if you ever need to adjust it, that is a very quick crash course on how you would do it. And we're almost done. So we're going to move on to our lower text layers. So just above it, there is another paper texture that is clipped to that folder. So it's really subtle, but just a little extra detail that you can see. We'll open it up and see what we have here. So let's go down to the very bottom. The one layer in this folder that is not a text layer is a shape layer, which is this home plate. Changing the color is very simple. Color overlay, just double click on that, and same thing. We've got a color swatch here, color picker. You can change it to any color that you want. There is a drop shadow on it just to create a little bit of dimension. It's not real prominent, but if you want to play with the values of the drop shadow, you can double click the word drop shadow or click right here, play with the opacity, distance, size, if you want it to, look like it's further away from the background. Those are all options. Now I have 2 text layers used for 2026, so if you like this look, you can just double click the 26 to change it if it is a different year. Pretty simple. We've already talked about how to change the color of a text layer, all very simple. Up here, we'll come to the top now. We have our first name option here, and it is a script font. There's not a whole lot to it. It has a drop shadow, so again, it's just double clicking and changing the name. I've already talked about the color. It also has drop shadow. All that's very simple, straightforward. We've got our last name. This one has a stroke outline on it, so we've already talked about how to change stroke outlines, but double click on the word stroke and you can change the stroke color. You can increase the size. You can get carried away, obviously. But all of this is very simple, straightforward. Now I created a subtext with senior, junior, sophomore, and freshman. You can double click on these and change it to anything that you want. I've got the dashes in here as well. I think in one of them I have in there like a pitcher or something like that. Wasn't a high school athlete. You can change it to anything you want, or you can turn it off. It does have this arch on here, so we talked about it a little bit at the very beginning, but if you double click to engage or activate the text layer, you can come up here to your warp effects, and you can see that I have a -8 arch lower on there. So you can use this drop down window and select none if you don't like that necessarily. So just another option, and that's it. So trying to zip through that one. Hopefully I've covered everything, but if there's anything that you get stuck on, or if you have any questions that I didn't cover, feel free to reach out to me. Email's best, don@thirdcreative.com. That is all for this one. I'm gonna keep it moving and start on the next one. So thank you for watching. Until the next one, we'll see you.